Hey everyone, exciting show. It is Monday. That means the expert series kicks off and we bring Greg Dickerson to the show. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I always find it amazing. We have every week is something new and exciting to talk about. We get to layer our experience of over 40 years combined and just try to look into the future a little bit. So thank you for being a part of the series.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I enjoy the conversations, and I think your audience enjoys it. And it is interesting. I mean, you and I are close to the same age, and we've been through a lot of economic cycles. And this is very, very different, very interesting. A lot of different dynamics. And what's really wild about what's going on right now is things can change from day to day, not
Yeah.
not monthly or quarterly, daily.
Yeah.
So what we said yesterday may not apply tomorrow. It's really interesting.
You are so right, and I tell people all the time, if you're a new investor in this next 6 month window, July to December, it is going to be really exciting. But please learn your market because it is going to be changing right in front of your eyes. You're going to be outbid by owner occupants probably. So don't rush, don't overpay. 2021 will be here in a heartbeat. So learn your market. So let's talk about stimulus first. I typically avoid stimulus videos. There's a
Yeah.
lot of YouTube entertainers out there that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on stimulus videos. I think it's funny. But let's relate stimulus to what we do, right? We both are
They don't make
investors.
quite as much as you think.
That's probably true. Yeah, they're certainly not making any money in real estate. That's for sure. I mean, some of their deals
Yeah.
are
They're making money
crazy.
on YouTube views, but it might be 100,000 a year, but it definitely ain't the month. I mean, you got to have millions of views to get to that level.
Yeah, it's crazy. But let's talk about stimulus because I'm looking at stimulus. I've used an analogy. See if this works for you, right? I think this health crisis is at a minimum a year in duration. We are now halfway through, and I think the government did a good job of building a bridge halfway through to reduce the pain. But now we are bickering, negotiating, fighting to build the second half of the bridge. And I want it to be known if you don't build the second half of the bridge, there's a huge chasm to fall off of. So do you see that analogy taking hold, or am I oversimplifying?
Yeah, it's I think you're right on track. So here's the first part of that. So when
Mhm.
you say it's a year out, what is that? What does that mean?
I'm
What is the
I'm at a
end of it?
year duration. Like we sort of went first lockdown in February, March. I can't see us getting, maybe it's 10 months, maybe it's 13 months, but it's not a 1 month, it's not a 6 month thing. We've got more time to go, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, getting back to
Oh,
what
getting back to
level?
what? Oh gosh. Certainly not 2019. I guess back to, let's say, 8% unemployment. Let's pick that
Right.
one.
Okay. Single digits unemployment and probably 80% GDP.
Probably. Yeah, 80,
Yeah.
but growing. Yeah.
So here's the thing. So what's interesting about this whole dilemma about when we're going to return somewhat back to normal and solve unemployment, solve GDP, get the consumer spending again. And, consumer spending was up a little bit, last month over the month before,
Hmm.
but still down, horribly overall. What we need is everybody's focused on a vaccine. That's not the big differentiator. We need a cure. We need a treatment. We need
Yep.
for people to know that this isn't going to kill you. You're just going to be sick for a couple of weeks, and you take this pill or you take this shot,
Hmm.
and you're not going to end up on a ventilator in the hospital for months.
Right.
That is the big differentiator that the attention and focus needs to be on, not a vaccine. It's on treatment and extinguishing any chance of death in the conversation or
Right.
equation, to where coronavirus becomes no more worse than the common cold or flu for the average person, which will take some lives
Hmm.
in normal conditions. So that's number one. So let's say we get that. Let's say we got a vaccine. Let's say we have a cure. Now you're off to the races. Now you're looking at a V recovery.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
If you can get to that point, we're off to the races. But again, what the Fed has done and with stimulus, it's provided liquidity, not solvency.
Yes.
So there's a lot of businesses out there. My dry cleaner, for example. So you've noticed my uniform of the day is polo shirts since we've been on quarantine.
Yeah.
Normally I'm wearing a dress shirt that's dry cleaned,
Yep.
but I'm not out and about going to meetings, doing those types of things. And so why, put on the dress shirt and do all that? I've just been throwing on a polo shirt. So I went to the dry cleaner last week for the first time in 2 months
Wow.
with, built up stuff that would normally be a week's worth. They're down 90%.
Wow.
90%. So when you think about businesses like that, that would normally, and now these guys are a chain, so they're employing, 100 people or more, that they've laid everybody off. There's like 6 or 8 people working. They're down 90%. And
Wow.
people like me, I mean, it's like, why wear the dress shirt? Why do the dry cleaning when I'm not going to office? I'm not going to meetings. I'm
Mhm.
not doing any of that. So when you think about businesses like that all across the board that most people aren't even really thinking of, that really drive economic activity.
Mhm.
Um, and then with what's going on with school, we got to get back to school. We've got to spend money to do, distance learning. We've got the holidays coming up. I think there's a lot of things that are kind of in the way of any, real growth or strength in the economy over the near term. And then, if we get vaccine and treatments a year out, um, that could change the game. But back to what I was talking about, the problem is what the Fed has done with the stimulus and all that, with PPE and all these other things, all it's done is keep a business like that just kind of going.
Yeah.
When they're not going to be able to, they're not, putting money in reserves, they're not making any money, they're just covering payroll at a very limited level versus what the Fed has done with, Wall Street, okay, and the banks,
Mhm.
and giving them the money and the ability to make billions of dollars off of all this free money that the Fed's pumping into,
Mhm.
by buying, buying debt, buying bonds, buying all these instruments. They're not buying the debt of the dry cleaner who needs $100,000
Yeah.
that he doesn't have to pay back. They're not buying the debt of the restaurant that can't pay his vendors and can't pay his rent. They're not buying and propping up real estate at this point,
Mm-mm.
which, that shoe is going to drop. And the banks, what they did was they gave the banks money to shore up their reserves so they
Yeah.
can just write that stuff off.
Right.
And, that stuff is going to get written off. The banks have much more incentive to, get rid of that and get it off their books than they do to try to carry it and work it out so that some of this stuff can get worked through the system. They don't want to have all this shadow inventory like we had from 2009. Um, so it's really, really interesting in terms of the stimulus and what it's affected where and who's actually the beneficiary. And, in terms of the conversations about inflation, things like that, unless you have that money reaching the consumer, you and me and everybody else watching this and going into our pockets, there can't be inflation because inflation is
Mhm.
driven by demand and consumers spending money,
Mhm.
and incomes going up, and we're not having those things.
Yeah, I want to talk about that one wrinkle there at the end because um, I want to make sure I understand it right, or see if I see the world correctly. One of the things out there, there's really two things that are kind of top of mind that everybody talks about, right? There's another $1,200 check per
Hmm.
person, up to $3,400 per family, and then there's the $600, right? Unemployment, gross up from the Fed.
Yeah.
What we need is we need that money to get to the consumer. Totally agree, but I think there's another step to that. We need them to consume, right? We need them to spend, because if we send $3,400 to everybody who makes 80 grand or less, but all they do is save it or they pay off debt, that doesn't help anyone, right?
Yeah.
Or helps very few. We need it. We need consumption. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, yeah, and you're not going to get that because number one, $1,200 is meaningful to some people,
Yes.
but it's only meaningful to the point that they can pay the electric bill and buy some groceries.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be able to go out and spend it just on discretionary items like retail
Yeah.
and restaurants, which is where a lot of the growth comes from. TVs, electronics, things like that. People aren't going out and buying that next TV right now. They're like, you know what? I think I'm going to hang on and just kind of see what happens. So
Right.
they're maybe they're paying their rent, and there are a lot of people that were getting the $600 a week. That's help them continue to pay their rent. So I think you're going to see, if that doesn't get fixed now, like
Mm.
this week,
Yeah.
you're going to see some pain in that area for landlords, which is going to be a whole nother issue. Now I know they're going to do something,
Yeah.
and they're going to do something quick. And Trump's talking about, I'll just do whatever without everybody and just unilaterally do something. The problem is, as we all know, is that there's a lot of people that won't go back to work that can because of that bonus.
Mm-hmm.
So, just marking it down isn't the answer. You've got to do it in a way that, hey, if you've got a job waiting for you and you do not go back, you don't get the bonus. I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
you control that. I don't know how that works, but if
Well,
there's a
I
job
mean,
waiting for you,
it's already out there, right? Just
yeah,
with regular unemployment, right? If you are offered a job and you say no, unemployment is supposed to stop. Now, obviously, it's self-reporting and all of that stuff, but that is already supposed to be in the system.
yeah. And, what's interesting to me is they're squabbling over that, but they're not squabbling over sending, hundreds of billions of dollars to, investment banks and hedge funds
Exactly. It's
and,
crazy.
Wall Street. So, it's really silly and ridiculous what they're squabbling and arguing over and how people need the money and whether, 600, I mean, what are you going to cut it? $200 a week? Is that really that meaningful in the whole equation you're talking about?
Yeah.
The average person that is having a very, very difficult time versus, some Wall Street bank or hedge fund or Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan that's getting all this free money and making billions of dollars at their trading desk.
Yeah. BlackRock, is the answer for the Fed to just transact all of these purchases and are making their 1% or whatever they're making fees.
Yeah.
Just take a small portion of that and pay everybody the 600. Again, I understand the logic of people staying at home and not doing their job, all of that. I frankly don't care.
That's a small percentage,
that
that
gets
might
glorified.
be 10 or 20% of the whole pile, right?
Yeah.
So you're hurting a lot of people that really need it, that have been able to pay their rent, have been able to keep other things going. So what I'm saying is there's a butterfly effect. So if you cut that $600 a week, that's going to reverberate through the economy and make it worse versus just keeping it out there.
Yeah.
Just like they do with the banks. Hey, banks, we'll give you money so you can shore up your reserves so you can be prepared for what's coming. If they didn't do that, the butterfly effect of the stock market going down and all that kind of stuff throughout the economy would be huge, would be a huge shock. They're not giving enough credit to the shock and the reverberation through the economy at the consumer level with this $600 a week thing until we get back to where everybody's working again and we're back where we're at.
I totally
agree. That's what I think they're not giving enough credit to.
I totally agree. I believe right now, again, I don't bring politics into this very often. I think the Democrats are negotiating better. I think they have it right, which really pains me to say. But the butterfly effect, I've not said that or heard that. I think that is exactly what I've been saying. They're not appreciating
politics,
that. No.
And it's not politics. People are hurting. People are desperate. And then there are some that are gaming and taking advantage of the system. But again, if they are, they're going to be spending the money. So it's kind of, wake up, people.
This is not the year to punish many by finding a few. It's
just like all the small businesses and the gyms and all that. So we're going to order you to close. You've spent your entire life putting this business together. Most of those small business owners, aren't getting rich. They might be making six figures if they're lucky, and they're using that to live. It is not cheap to live, people. So they're not able to store up a lot of money, have a lot of reserves, and be able to weather any kind of significant downturn. There's no help for them. The only help was, hey, we can help you keep people on staff, and employed, but there's no money to make up for the lost income that they were generating. As a small business owner, the money didn't go, once again, just like 2009, it hasn't reached the pockets it needed to reach to generate economic recovery, economic activity to really pull us out of this hole. Totally. So that's that whole butterfly effect that I'm talking about, that they just can't figure out a way to get it done.
Nice. I like that. So let's transition to something I think we both have agreed on in the past. And that is that there will be winners and losers from the real estate market, right? Big cities in like San Francisco, New York are going to be losers as people leave to the cities, leave cities to go to the suburbs, right? Space is good, all of that stuff. I want to share with you some data I got yesterday about San Francisco, right? I think San Francisco will be hit second hardest after New York. And there's two things. First off, active listings in the city of San Francisco were up 111% in July, which is unusual because every other market I hear listings are down. So that's 0.1, and they were up triple digits. And then the second thing is now rent has gone from 1 free month to 2 free months to sign a year-long lease. So these are things that I haven't seen since, I didn't see this since 2006. So that's what's happening in San Francisco.
So you got to quantify it. So what does 11% mean? Does it go from 10 listings to 21? You see what I'm saying? So
it went from, I'll be close. I think it went from 512 to 1,137, I think, something like that.
Okay. And what's normal?
I would say normal, again, removing 2020, it's like 650 to 700.
Okay. So it still hasn't reached normal peak inventory levels, but it's
it's above that. No, so 700's peak, it's at 1,100.
Oh, 1,100. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. So it is, okay. So it's beyond normal threshold. So that's meaningful. So that tells you right there, there's an issue, there's a problem, and there's an inventory the interesting thing is, in San Francisco is different. Seattle would probably be another good one to kind of compare because they're a lot of tech jobs,
Yep.
tech industry there. New York is kind of different than a San Francisco or a Seattle because, San Francisco and Seattle, the tech boom has driven a lot of that,
True.
demand for housing there. Whereas like New York, the demand was already there before any of that. It's New
Very
York,
true.
right? So it's a whole different level of animal. LA is another one too. LA has always been a city of, density prior to any economic boom,
Yep.
or things like that. So it's really interesting thing is going to be how long-term and permanent is this? I know there's an exodus right now, but again, once we get through this, get back to the other side, some people want to be in the city. They want to be in the middle of the action. They want to be in a 24/7 environment. So I'm not sure if that's going to be a permanent thing or if it's going to be a temporary thing. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things that are clear. I think San Francisco has pain ahead, right? It's interesting. While active listings were up 111%, prices still went up, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's it's kind of noise in the system, but it is very clear from the people that I talk to that have places in the city. I would say a third of my friends, because I used to work right there on 2nd and Branham, right downtown, right off the Embarcadero, which is, people know San Francisco. It's right in the heart of tech. And about a third of them have already said they're leaving, right? They were,
wow.
Many of them were renting like for $3,000. They had a 1-bedroom, or some of them a studio. A third of the people that I know out there have already said they're leaving or will leave when their lease is up, and they're going to go buy something in another state. So it's real.
Now, why is that? What's driving that?
They're basic. Again, the third of the people that said that is their employers have encouraged it. They've flat out encouraged it. They said, hey, if you can find a place where we have another office, you can move there. We will not, many of them are saying we won't impact your pay. Some of them are saying we'll adjust your pay slightly, but they're going for quality of life, right? They have kids. They've always wanted to own. They can't own in San Francisco where the median price is 7 figures. They can't save anything because they're spending ridiculous amounts of money on rent. And you can't go outside. San Francisco is getting dirty and the tent cities are popping up everywhere. It's almost unsafe again.
Yeah, that's a big, unusual, that's exclusive to San Francisco, that problem. When you go to New York, you don't see a lot of that. They've done a really good job with it. However, crime is on the rise with the disregard for police and people thinking there's not going to be any recourse. They can just do whatever they want now.
Yeah.
Chicago, Seattle, Portland, New York. You're not seeing it so much in Los Angeles, but I'm sure it's happening. But crime is on the rise everywhere just because of the disregard for police, defunding, that whole argument, things like that. The bottom line is there's a attitude out there right now that the police aren't going to do anything or can't do anything. San Francisco is one. I mean, I would on San Francisco in terms of what they do not enforce in terms of, just violations of, theft, drug use, out in the open public. They won't arrest you if you snatch somebody's purse.
Yep.
It's just crazy to be in a society like that, because what makes this country great is the rule of law, right? That's what makes us a great country is the rule of law. So anyways, that's an interesting conversation in terms of what is the long-term effect. I know it's going on right now, but will it continue? And, there's always going to be young people that are going to want to live in, again, they're going to want to live in the city 24/7, have that excitement, that environment, but what is that inventory going to look like? Because, where's the population washing out right now with what's going on? Or is there really that, we really increasing exponentially? I don't know. It's there's a lot going on with that conversation.
Yeah, we're going to see. I think, again, a lot of tech workers, again, it's a bias of mine. I've been doing it for 25 years. Not only are we seeing existing employees leave, but what I'm really seeing shut off is new hiring, college graduates, internships.
Yeah.
They're not happening. And when they are happening, they're having them be remote, right? So that what used to make the Silicon Valley great is, every year we kind of recycle the population, right? Older folks would get married, have kids, blah, blah, blah. They'd move out, and then we'd rush in with, new Stanford grads and MIT grads and, all of that. That is shut off. And now I don't know if that's a 1-year thing, a 2-year thing, but if you can't refill the gaps from the people leaving, that eventually becomes a cycle that is detrimental to values and rent.
Yeah. And, and it's happening in New York. There's vacancies everywhere. They're giving away free rent. We're seeing a retail switch there. But here's the interesting thing to think about. So the Depression damaged a lot of people for a long period of time. A lot of people carried that, trauma from the Depression throughout the rest of their lives. Like my grandparents, I'm in my 50s. My grandparents lived, I guess they were coming up in the Depression era. Yeah. They always had tons of food. They kept a deep freezer full. They kept their pantry stocked. They were always ready to run out of food and not have food.
Yeah.
And, they didn't go out and spend money. They put all their money in the bank. So that affected them from childhood, the rest of their lives. The 2008-9 crisis, financial crisis, there's a lot of people that has permanently affected in terms of how they spend and, how they, what their financial habits are and were moving forward. Although we've largely forgotten a lot of it at this point, but it did fundamentally change behavior for a while. The question is, how long will the scars from this crisis carry forward?
Yeah.
So once we get through it, we've got a cure, we've got a vaccine, we've got a cure, and it's no longer an issue. Do we just, boom, everybody's back to the cities and we're back to normal?
Yeah.
Or is some of this going to be carried, this whole work from home movement?
Yep.
I can tell you it's not the same. It's not the same. There's a big difference between being in that office environment, having everybody around you, that camaraderie, just all of that. People like that. They crave it. They like that human connection. But then there's a lot of people that have realized that, wow, I actually like working from home. Now, let's hear you say that when your kids go back to school and they're doing distance learning and you're trying to work from home. That's going to be a problem when, they're not back to school and you've got the house all to yourself and you got to carve out a niche like I do in the most quiet space you can find where nobody's coming and going,
Right. Well, I think that is the conversation that we need to be having is, I personally believe, and I've said a couple of times, that I think this event is going to be that thing in our lifetime that impacts people for decades, right? The '08 crisis, that certainly impacted some. If you were one of those people that had a liar loan or you were a renter and then were a buyer and you were a renter, you could be scarred. Maybe your kids kind of remember that losing the house thing. But I think that impacted a small subset of overall population. I think this event is impacting everyone. This isn't everyone.
So the biggest thing carried forward from 2008-9 was the whole home ownership is the way to build wealth mentality.
True. Yep.
So that generation that came up through that and saw, wait a minute, owning a house is not a good idea.
Yeah.
Right. So that created the rental movement.
Yeah.
So that pushed a lot of people into renting. And even now, when you do the numbers and do the math, even at 2.5, 2.7%, it really doesn't make financial sense to own a house long-term for 30 years because of what you pay for it in interest, expenses, taxes, insurance, maintenance, all those things. And I did the numbers. When you take that down payment plus all those costs and reinvest that money at, 7, 8, 10%, that's a better investment than owning a house long-term. You're better off paying rent, and doing that, especially if, depending on where you're at and what you're doing. Now, some people just need a house and they don't want to have to move and they need the yard for the kids and all that.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing that did carry forward from 2008-9 was that mentality that a home is your best investment.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I do.
We all grew up.
Housing only goes up. Yeah, I remember.
Only goes up. And hey, in our lifetime, that's been true until 2009. And it's never recovered long-term since 2009. And if you think about now, moving forward, it used to be houses were worth, 10, 20 times in 30 years what you paid for it. It's just hard to comprehend because incomes are not doing that. And that's where in all of this, that's where you're going to have a big problem. Rents have gone up, expenses have gone up, other costs have gone up. We've had some inflation at the consumer level. Incomes have not. Incomes have been coming down and kind of maintaining while everything else has been increasing exponentially. And that's what I tell people that are, that I'm working with and talking that are going into the rental world. Don't think you're going to exponentially increase rents by, tenfold or double every 10 years or whatever people think. And what we've seen in the past, rents have doubled maybe every 7 to 10 years pre 2008-9, but they haven't doubled in the last 10 years, I don't think.
No.
And they could potentially come backwards with rent controls, all that. And then, the other big thing you're facing in California that you're probably going to see in New York and Los Angeles and some of the other bigger cities is the tax conversation. you know, and that's going to hit home for everybody everywhere, because all of the cities, states, governments, counties, you know, have that huge hole that they have to fill.
Yeah.
Schools are getting more expensive, you know, government's getting more expensive. So they're going to come digging.
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's a conversation we need to have, because this is the chessboard, right? Your politicians, again, California, New York,
Yeah.
probably Illinois, right? A couple of big, you know, blue states. They're going to come out and tell you they're going to tax the rich. They're going to do a billionaire tax in New York. In California, they're talking about taxing people who make $1 million a year. But here's the problem, folks. When your state picks a target who is financially solvent and has options, you are going to see a percent of that people leave. Right? In California, you probably don't know this, but I just did research on this. 0.5% of the population of California, 0.5, so 0.5%, pays 40% of California's income tax collection. And they're talking about raising taxes on them by 3%.
Yeah.
Going from 13.3 to 16.8. I'm sorry, folks. I'm guessing 20 to 30% of those people are leaving and are already leaving. Hence my San Francisco conversation, right? They're going to go 2.5 hours east and reside in Nevada.
And then, so my question is, what's going to happen in Texas, Florida, Nevada, where there's no state tax and all that? Are they now going to start instituting some of these other taxes because, you know, they're in a hole, right?
Yeah,
so,
Nevada,
you know,
specifically, my goodness, their gaming revenue is down 98%.
So, you know, another message to Washington, how do you solve all this problem? You know, to cities, states, counties, Washington, national sales tax. You solve it all right there, national sales tax.
Oh, my
Across the board, people pay tax at point of sale. No longer, you don't need an IRS, you don't need capital gains. You get rid of everything across the board, the tax code, you throw it in the trash. You pay the national sales tax, you pay a state sales tax. Everybody's happy. Everybody is paying their fair share. So understand what I'm saying here. People that are working under the table, which isn't just like, you know, illegal immigrants and stuff. It's some of them, but it's people that, you know, are, you know, gaming the system. You know, maybe they're, you know, drug dealers, whatever. Anybody and everybody who's consuming now is paying their fair share of taxes. So it's criminals, it's illegal immigrants. You know, I think we should get everybody on the books, get everybody paying. And if you have a national sales tax like that, there's ways to make it equitable. You know, people can carry a card for certain income levels to get discounts or whatever. You know, or they get a refund, you know, or you know, they get a rebate check, you know, quarterly, annually, like whatever from the government.
Tax,
based on their income. So, I mean, the fact that nobody in Washington is talking about that is just beyond me. It's kind of like,
it's a good idea. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, it's kind of like the stimulus, you know, just all you have to do is this and the whole problem is solved. You know, so that's one. You know, open up lines of credit for small business so they can replace what they lost and stay open and hire everybody, you know, once we get back, you know? So,
I want to go back to the chessboard analogy because I failed to finish my thought because I got so passionate. Basically what's going to happen, at least in California, is we're going to raise taxes on the millionaires. A portion of them are going to leave. That is going to create a bigger hole, not a smaller hole, because again, they're already paying 40% of what we have and we got to replace that portion. So the middle class in California, you are about to have the biggest state income tax of your lifetime because the raising taxes on millionaires is not going to work. It's not the cure-all. It markets well. It sounds good. Eat the rich, all that nonsense. They're just going to leave. They have options. They have 49 other states to consider. And, you know, a portion of them are going to leave. And that is going to mean the middle class in California gets smacked. So that's the chessboard as I see it.
Yeah, and you know, the wealthy know they can maintain, you know, their permanent residence in one state, but spend all their time somewhere else. So they might leave from a permanent residency standpoint, but they might still stay in California and consume and utilize the resources. So yeah, I mean that's not going to solve any problems.
Yeah, I totally agree. So what are you looking at as we wrap this up? What do you think is going to happen with the stimulus? Because I agree with you, something has to happen.
You know, I think obviously they're going to send the $1,200, you know, out and do that again and whatever that equates to for the family. But it seems like they're going to get to some level of something that's not $600 a week. You know, it seems like they want to do
somewhere between 6
80%.
and 200.
Yeah, you know, something. So, you know, I don't know what there's obviously more, but beyond that conversation that's going on, you know, and we'll find out that they were, you know, $100 million for some stupid study of some
pork,
something.
Lots of pork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's really going on. So it's got nothing to do with stimulus. Those people in Washington could care less about the average American out there who's suffering right now.
Oh,
All they
that's
care about
so
is
true.
their own personal agendas, and I'm talking all of them across the board. It is so ridiculous, how it operates, and um,
Yeah.
those types of things, and packing all that junk into a bill when people are suffering, hurting, and they don't know if they're going to get any money this week.
They're not.
You know,
Because even if they turn it on, I read an analysis yesterday. Even if they turned it on, it would be best case August 21st
yeah,
before the money started trickling in again. It's
really, August 21st.
August 21st. Yeah, the 600
Wow,
bucks.
so that's 3 weeks. So
3
yeah,
weeks.
so that's serious damage, no matter how you slice it, for somebody right there.
Yeah, I agree. All right, man. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's always fun. I'm going to put it on the table right now that they keep going with the 600 bucks. I'm just going to say it. I hope they
Yeah,
keep that up.
they should. So let's hope they do.
There you go. All right, man.